On a cold November morning in 1944, Allied aircraft crossed a quiet Yugoslav sky with absolute confidence that they knew who their enemies were. Within an hour, American and Soviet pilots, officially allies, would be circling, chasing, and firing at each other over the city of Niš. It would become one of the most extraordinary and uncomfortable episodes of World War II. The day American P-38 Lightnings and Soviet Yak fighters clashed in a mistaken, frantic battle that almost no one wanted to talk about afterward. This is the story of how a navigational error, a cloud of steam, and the chaos of a crowded battlefield turned partners into unintended adversaries, and how both sides had to live with what happened in that sky. It's the morning of November 7th, 1944. 12 P-38. Lightnings from the U.S. 15th Air Force are flying high above Yugoslavia. Their mission is clear: hunt German trains, columns, and vehicles that might still be retreating or counterattacking along the roads and railways. Leading the formation is Colonel Clarence Theodore Curly Edwinson, a seasoned commander who has flown dozens of missions over Europe. He knows the P-38 well. Its twin booms, its speed, and its concentrated firepower make it a formidable hunter. From his cockpit, the broken landscape of wartime Yugoslavia stretches out below, a patchwork of ravines, forests, roads, and rail lines. Then Edwinson sees it, a rising plume of white steam cutting through the chill air. Down below, a German steam train is pushing along the tracks, a vulnerable piece of machinery in a sky now controlled by Allied fighters. It's not their primary target, but it's exactly the sort of prize they have been sent to disrupt. Rail lines feed armies, locomotives keep supplies moving. Edwinson doesn't hesitate. "Let's go get it, boys," he calls over the radio. The Lightnings roll over, noses dipping toward the ground. Engines howl louder as the formation accelerates into the attack. One by one, their pilots line up the locomotive in their sights, turning steel and steam into a single, focused point in the glass. The first passes are swift and precise. Streams of concentrated fire lash across the locomotive and cars. The air fills with escaping steam as pipes and panels are torn open. The engine slows, wounded, as white vapor pours from new ruptures along the boiler and undercarriage. The Lightnings pull up, climbing back toward altitude. For a moment, it feels like a well-executed strike. Fast, controlled, textbook. But the skies over wartime Yugoslavia are anything but empty and safe. Dark bursts suddenly mushroom around the formation. German anti-aircraft positions, guarding vital transport lines, have not been idle. Black puffs appear in the sky, followed by sharp impacts against thin aluminum skin. "Everyone, get low," Edwinson calls, his voice tight but controlled. The P-38s begin to descend, trying to trade altitude for speed and terrain cover, slipping beneath the layers of defensive fire. One Lightning, though, is not fortunate. A burst of flak finds its mark. The aircraft jolts as fragments punch through its structure. Fuel and control lines are damaged in an instant. Flames begin to trail from the stricken machine, turning its sleek outline into a streak of fire against the sky. "I'm hit! I'm going down!" The pilot's voice cracks over the radio. The squadron dives for safety, trying to escape the flak envelope. Edwinson levels out low over the trees, heart pounding, eyes scanning desperately behind him. Somewhere back there, one of his men is fighting for control. But instead of a recovering aircraft, he sees a distant bright flare near a hillside, an uncontrolled descent that ends in a brief, fierce burst of light and smoke. "Does anyone see a chute?" he asks, hoping against hope. Silence follows. Finally, a calm but heavy answer. "Negative, sir." Fury and grief mix inside the cockpit. In moments like this, war stops being a map and becomes something deeply personal. A voice you heard every day is suddenly gone, replaced by static. "Copy," Edwinson replies quietly. There's nothing more to say. The remaining lightnings roar over the Serbian mountains, flying low now, hugging the contours of the land. The mission is still underway. Fuel is burning. The enemy is somewhere out there, and the skies are unforgiving to anyone who lingers without purpose. Then the terrain ahead drops away. A broad valley opens beneath them, with roads and open fields, and, most importantly, an airfield. From above, the layout looks uncannily familiar. A close match to the target area they had been briefed on. To their eyes, this is enemy territory. As the P-38s cross into the valley, Edwinson spots something else that seems to confirm his assumption. Along a road leading north toward Belgrade, a long column of vehicles is moving. Trucks, support vehicles, even tracked machines. In his mind, the pieces snap into place. A German column, retreating or reinforcing, moving along a key route under cover of overcast skies. "There they are," he calls. "Blue flight, take that convoy. Red and yellow, go for the airfield." The orders flow easily, the lightnings split into elements, each group descending toward what they firmly believe to be German forces. There is no hint yet that anything is wrong. What they cannot know is that this is not a German column. It belongs to the Soviet 6th Guards Rifle Corps. Red Army soldiers moving through territory believed to be safely behind the front. They are surrounded by Yugoslav partisans, marching under banners and flags on a day of celebration. For the troops on the ground, November 7th is not just another day. It is the anniversary of the October Revolution, an important date in the Soviet calendar. Red Army soldiers and Yugoslav partisans travel in their vehicles, some singing, others talking quietly, Soviet flags fluttering in the cold air. After years of hardship, the advance into the Balkans carries a sense of momentum and cautious hope. The German forces are retreating. The front is moving west. When the rumble of engines grows louder overhead, many of the soldiers look up and smile. They see the distinctive twin-boom silhouettes of P-38 Lightnings, aircraft flown by their American allies. To them, these shapes in the sky represent support, solidarity, and shared purpose. There is no reason, yet, to believe that those friendly aircraft could possibly mistake them for the enemy. Up above, the perspective is completely different. The pilots see vehicles on a road in a contested region. They see an airfield in a valley that fits their briefing. They see movement, but not the subtle details of flags or uniforms. As some of the P-38s break formation and turn toward the column, a few Soviet soldiers on the ground feel a sudden chill. The aircraft are not just passing overhead, they are lining up. The first men to sense danger grab their flags and wave them higher, desperate to signal their identity to the oncoming fighters. But in the seconds available, at the speed the aircraft are moving, it is nearly impossible for the pilots to read those signs clearly. The roar grows into a deafening thunder. The lightnings descend, and to the Americans, this is simply what they have trained to do: attack an enemy column, swiftly and decisively. They open fire. The road erupts into chaos. Vehicles swerve. Men scatter for whatever cover they can find, and the easy confidence of a celebration vanishes in an instant. Along the line of vehicles, the effect is devastating. The first passes rake the road, damaging trucks and equipment, tearing into the column's orderly formation. Soldiers throw themselves into ditches, rush behind embankments, or cling to whatever shelter they can reach. Dust, smoke, and fragments obscure everything. The American pilots see only a target zone responding as any enemy would, dispersing, reacting, trying to survive the sudden assault. The confusion on the ground looks to them like resistance, not shock. At a nearby airfield, Soviet lookouts hear distant detonations and see smoke rising in the direction of the column. Moments later, they spot a swarm of aircraft turning toward the base. Sirens sound and train reflexes take over. "Man the guns!" comes the order. Soviet anti-aircraft crews rush to their positions, their training telling them only one thing: aircraft approaching at low altitude and high speed are almost certainly hostile. The American formation now splits its attention. Some lightnings remain focused on the road, others descend toward the airfield itself, convinced they are facing a German base filled with parked Luftwaffe aircraft. To Edwinson and his men, the airfield resembles one that might host Bf-109s and tactical reconnaissance planes. They have been briefed on German forces in the region, including aircraft that share a rough similarity in shape to the P-38's twin-boom design. It is entirely plausible in their minds that this is enemy territory. As they approach, the sky around them begins to light up with tracer fire. Soviet anti-aircraft guns, believing they are under German attack, send bright streaks into the air. Some rounds pass close. Others find their marks, rattling against the P-38's structures. But the Americans press on. Their concentrated forward armament, cannons and heavy machine guns grouped in the nose, unleashes towards the rows of aircraft parked on the ground. Dust and debris leap from the runway and surrounding areas as the strike unfolds. "Pull up!" The order echoes through the radios as the lightnings streak low over the field and then begin to climb. Most of them respond instantly, arcing back towards safety, but not every aircraft can answer so easily. Second Lieutenant Eldon Coulson's P-38 has been severely damaged. Anti-aircraft fire has torn into critical control surfaces. His aircraft is lower than expected, flying at the edge of controllability, drawing concentrated fire from defenders who believe they are fighting German intruders. "She's not coming up," he reports, struggling with the controls. Additional impacts rake his aircraft. Wings and tail surfaces suffer further damage. The Lightning begins to descend in a shallow but unstoppable path, slipping from Coulson's control despite his efforts. A short distance from the airfield, his aircraft strikes the ground and breaks apart in a brief, intense flare. From above, Edwinson sees another ball of fire in smoke, a second aircraft lost in a mission that was supposed to target German forces, not allies. For the Soviet defenders on the ground, there is no hint yet that these intruders are anything other than enemy aircraft. The twin-boom silhouette of the P-38 is not entirely unfamiliar. German FW-189 reconnaissance aircraft share a broadly similar outline. In the rapid, high-stress environment of an air raid, identification can hinge on split-second impressions. Combat alert, all pilots, scramble. Red Army pilots rush toward their fighters on the field. Yak 9s standing ready among smoke, dust, and the echoes of recent detonations. Two of them, Lieutenant Dmitry Krivonogic and his wingman, Junior Lieutenant Shipulya, are among the first to respond. As they taxi into position, They can see the attacking aircraft circling to come in again. Time is short. There is no room for hesitation. "Shipulia, faster!" Krivonogik urges. Moments later, the Yak 9s roar down the runway and lift into the sky, climbing into a battlefield that neither side truly understands. The two Soviet fighters skim along the treetops at first, racing away from the immediate danger zone and trying to gain space to maneuver. Behind them, other Yaks attempt to take off in larger groups, but these aircraft are climbing directly into the path of experienced American fighter pilots already engaged and on high alert. Edwinson, still convinced he is facing German opposition, issues a clear instruction: get those planes before they gain altitude. His pilots respond. Diving at high speed, they engage the newly launched Yaks, while anti-aircraft guns from below continue to send tracer streams upward. In the confusion, Soviet fighters lifting off in formation become highly vulnerable. Under concentrated fire from the lightnings overhead and enveloped in the haze of smoke and dust, some of them are quickly damaged or forced down before they can properly join the fight. Others break away in desperate evasive maneuvers, scattering through the sky. Krivonogik and Shipulia, flying low and fast, witness the chaos behind them. Their comrades are in trouble, and the ground column, still under attack, is depending on someone to push the intruders back. For the first time in history, American and Soviet fighter pilots are about to engage one another directly in a sustained air-to-air battle. Krivonogik and Shipulia know they are outnumbered, but they also know that they cannot simply watch from a distance. Below them, the friendly convoy is still exposed. Above them, foreign aircraft are maneuvering as if this were a conventional dogfight with a recognized enemy. "Shipulia, attack! I'll cover you!" Krivonogik calls. "Roger that," comes the reply. Shipulia pushes his Yak into a climbing turn, aiming for one of the lightnings. He knows the P-38 is fast and heavily armed, but he also trusts the agility of his own fighter. Closing the distance, he brings his guns to bear and opens fire. Rounds streak across the sky, striking one of the P-38's twin fuselages. The American aircraft is clearly hit, but not yet out of the fight. Shipulia flashes past at high speed, forced to pull away and set up another pass. Up above, one of the American pilots calls for support. Two P-38s, circling at a higher altitude, respond and begin to dive toward Shipulia's position. From his own cockpit, Krivonogik sees what is coming. "Shipulia, maneuver, brake right," he shouts. At the very last moment, Shipulia responds, banking hard. Bright tracer lines streak through the space where his aircraft had been only a heartbeat before. He twists and turns, using every bit of his training to stay just ahead of the incoming fire. But he is clearly on the defensive now. "I can't shake him," Shipulia calls, tension in his voice. "Hang on, I'm coming," Krivonogik replies, pushing his Yak toward the swirling fight as quickly as he can. His heart pounds with every burst of fire that passes near his wingman. Krivonogik closes in on the fight. He lines up on one of the P-38s pursuing Shipulia and squeezes the trigger. His first burst passed just behind the lightning, close enough to convince the American pilot that the situation has changed. The P-38 breaks off, abandoning its attack. Krivonogik doesn't follow. Instead, he shifts his attention to the second lightning still closing in on his wingman. He steadies his aircraft, corrects his aim, and fires again. This time, his rounds track cleanly into the P-38's twin booms. The stricken aircraft begins to trail smoke, then flame. Its path becomes erratic, slipping into an uncontrolled descent. The American pilot manages to open his canopy and escape, parachuting away from the aircraft before it strikes the ground several kilometers from the airfield. "Thank you, Commander," Shipulya says, catching his breath. "You're welcome. Prepare to fight," Krivonogik responds. The battle is far from over. Reinforcements arrive. The rest of the Soviet squadron bursts into the engagement area, climbing into the swirling airspace above the valley. Their arrival changes the balance of the fight, at least for the moment. American pilots, now facing more opponents than anticipated, begin to form defensive patterns. Edwinson orders his remaining Lightnings into a protective circle, a classic tactic designed to cover one another from multiple directions. Below them, the column that started this tragedy continues to bear the scars of the initial attack. Vehicles are damaged or halted, soldiers are regrouping, and medical personnel are doing what they can in difficult conditions. The cost of misidentification is already painfully real on the ground. In the sky, though, most of the participants still believe they are engaged with enemy forces. Pilots on both sides focus on survival, on protecting their comrades, and on reacting to threats that appear in front of their gun sights for only seconds at a time. Krivonogik spots another P-38 breaking from the circle and gives chase. The two fighters spiral upward in a tightening climb, each pilot pushing his machine toward its limits. The P-38 is fast and powerful, but at lower altitudes and in tight maneuvering, the Soviet pilot knows his Yak can hold its own. Gradually, he begins to close the distance, angling for a position where he can bring his guns to bear. On the ground, however, another danger is lurking. A Soviet anti-aircraft crew, still keyed in on enemy silhouettes, sees a fighter in pursuit of a P-38 and reacts in the most straightforward way available. They open fire on the aircraft they believe to be hostile. Whether through miscommunication, misalignment, or simple chaos, their aim settles on Krivonogik's Yak. He receives no warning. In the very next moments, rounds strike his fighter with catastrophic effect. The aircraft breaks apart in midair, leaving only fragments and smoke in its place. Shipulya, searching for his commander on the radio, looks down and sees debris falling toward the earth. He understands at once what has happened, but there is no time to process the loss. The sky is still full of enemy aircraft. Grief has to be pushed aside. Shipulya forces himself to focus, scanning for an opportunity even as he wrestles with the knowledge that his friend and commander has just been lost. He spots an American fighter below and angles his Yak into another attack run. Outnumbered and increasingly surrounded, he chooses to engage anyway. It is a decision driven by duty, training, and the immediate need to protect the forces on the ground. But the P-38s are still numerous, and their pilots are experienced. One Lightning executes a steep climb, then noses over into a controlled stall turn, dropping behind Shipulya's Yak at close range. Within seconds, the Yak is under intense fire. The aircraft is struck repeatedly, losing critical control surfaces. Shipulya's fighter slips out of his control, descending toward the ground near the airfield he is trying to defend. Another Soviet aircraft is lost in the confusion of a battle that should never have happened. Soviet losses are mounting. Another Yak is brought down by the Americans. Debris and smoke mark the sites where aircraft have met the earth. On the ground, commanders urgently radio nearby bases, calling for reinforcements and clarity. In response, a fresh group of Yak-3 fighters, faster and more agile than earlier models, races toward the area. They are led by Captain Alexander Koldunov, an accomplished pilot with significant combat experience. Koldenov has been told that the airfield is under attack by German FW-189 reconnaissance aircraft, twin-boom machines that, from a distance, can resemble the American P-38. Even as he accelerates toward the engagement, something about that description feels off. FW-189s are not typically used in this kind of sustained, aggressive ground attack. Something is wrong here, he reflects to himself as the battle zone comes into view. As Koldunov's flight approaches, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Against the clouds and smoke, he can clearly see the outlines of the attacking aircraft. These are not FW-189s. The long central nacelle, the twin booms, the overall shape. This is the unmistakable form of the American P-38 Lightning. A shock runs through him. The planes firing on Soviet positions are not German. They belong to an ally. Koldenov immediately abandons his attack posture and instead closes in alongside one of the P-38s, wagging his wings and presenting his aircraft in a way that makes the red stars on his fuselage unmistakable at close range. He is taking a considerable risk, trusting that recognition will prevent further tragedy. "We are allies," he signals with his actions, if not with his words. For a moment, it seems as if the message is not getting through. One of the Lightnings slows, slips behind Koldunov, and moves into a position from which it could open fire. "Come on, what are you doing?" he mutters, throwing his Yak into evasive maneuvers to avoid another volley. He makes a second attempt. Once again, he flies close to the American formation, deliberately exposing the national markings on his aircraft, hoping that someone will finally recognize the truth, that both sides are fighting on the same team. This time, he draws near to Edwinson's own P-38. The American commander sees the red stars clearly. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. These are not German interceptors. The enemy airfield below is not a Luftwaffe base. The convoy on the road is not a German column. They have been attacking their own allies. A wave of cold dread spreads through Edwinson. In seconds, memories of the day's events reorder themselves in his mind. The column on the road, the airfield, the stubborn defenders, the skilled pilots and Yak fighters. It all looks different now under this new light. He grabs his radio. "Cease fire, cease fire," he calls. "They are Soviets. Everyone back to base, now. Repeat, everyone back to base, now." The order ripples through the American formation. One by one, the P-38s break off from the engagement, turning away from the airfield and climbing westward. Below, some Soviet pilots, still believing they are facing enemy aircraft, instinctively give chase. But Koldunov also transmits his own order. All pilots are to break off and return to base. The misunderstanding has finally been recognized. Continuing the fight would only add to the tragedy. Slowly, the sky begins to clear. Smoke still hangs over the valley, but the sound of engines fades as both sides disengage. On the ground and in the air, the cost of those confused minutes is painfully evident. Vehicles lie damaged along the road. The Soviet column has suffered significant losses. Several aircraft, American and Soviet, have been destroyed or forced down, their wrecks scattered around the countryside near Nish. News of the incident travels quickly up the chain of command. For the Red Army, the loss of personnel, including senior officers, under fire from an ally is a harsh blow. For the United States Army Air Forces, the realization that their navigational error has led to such consequences is both sobering and deeply troubling. In the days that follow, angry voices and cooler heads collide. Some Soviet officials initially interpret the attack as deliberate, a sign of hidden intentions beneath the alliance. Others, examining maps and mission orders, see instead a tragic convergence of misjudgment, weather, and the fog of war. The Americans issue a formal explanation and apology, detailing the events as they understood them. An operation directed against German targets that, due to navigation and identification errors, struck Soviet forces by mistake. Both sides ultimately decide that this incident, as painful as it is, must not be allowed to fracture the alliance at a critical stage of the war. The common objective, the defeat of Nazi Germany, takes precedence. The episode is not given wide public attention at the time. In some accounts, details remain buried in archives, overshadowed by larger battles and conferences. Stories circulate among veterans and within specialized reports, but for the broader public, the sky over Niš remains largely unknown. Over the decades, fragments of the story emerge. Memoirs from Soviet officers, technical analyses by historians, and recollections from American airmen. Some accounts emphasize the bravery of pilots like Koldunov, who risked approaching Allied aircraft to stop the fighting. Others focus on the human cost for the Soviet soldiers on the ground. Together, they paint a picture of how fragile understanding can be in the midst of complex operations, and how, even among allies, mistakes can have lasting consequences. On a human level, the Niš incident is a reminder that behind every symbol on a map, every arrow, every aircraft icon, are individuals with families, hopes, and fears. For the American pilots, the realization that they had unknowingly attacked Allied troops and engaged Soviet fighters left a mark that could not be easily erased. Training, discipline, and mission focus had guided their actions, but so had incomplete information and misleading assumptions. For the Soviet soldiers and pilots, the shock of coming under fire from aircraft they associated with support and partnership was equally profound. The losses they endured that day became part of their own personal histories. Episodes remembered quietly, sometimes shared only years later. Yet many of those same veterans, when interviewed long after the war, emphasized not bitterness, but complexity. They understood how fast decisions must be made in the air, how limited visibility can distort reality, and how the fog of war can bend even the best intentions into unintended harm. Today, the air battle over Niš stands as a unique moment in World War II, a brief, intense clash between American and Soviet forces who were supposed to be fighting on the same side. It did not change the overall course of the war, nor did it break the alliance, but it did reveal how easily misunderstandings can escalate when decisions are made at hundreds of kilometers per hour, with limited visibility and under the constant pressure of danger. The P-38s and Yaks that met in that sky have long since disappeared, replaced by newer generations of aircraft and technologies. Yet the core lesson they left behind still resonates. Even in the most carefully planned operations, humans are working with incomplete information, and humility in the face of that uncertainty is essential. The men who flew and drove and commanded that day, American and Soviet alike, faced a reality in which a rising column of steam, a misread valley, or a mistaken silhouette could change everything. Their story is not simply one of error, but of how, even after tragedy, recognition, communication, and restraint prevented something far worse.